Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into one of the darkest, most haunting moments in modern history, the final collapse of Nazi Germany. You find yourself in the heart of Berlin, April 1945. The city is barely alive. Its bones are concrete, its veins are tunnels, and its breath smells of smoke, dust, and defeat. The war that began with parades and promises now ends in whispers and rubble. And honestly, you probably won't survive this one. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a sound, low, rumbling thunder that isn't thunder. Soviet artillery. Each blast makes the walls tremble, each window shiver in its cracked frame. The once proud capital of Hitler's Reich is unrecognizable. Streets that once glowed with torchlight parades are now rivers of mud and shattered glass. The Tiergarten's trees are splintered stumps, the Brandenburg Gate is scarred by shrapnel, and black smoke curls upward in lazy, almost beautiful spirals. You trudge through the ruins, boots crunching over plaster and charred paper, burnt propaganda leaflets promising final victory. Somewhere nearby, an old radio still crackles faintly, a clipped German voice insisting that reinforcements will turn the tide. But even the static seems tired of lying. There's a strange quiet between explosions. In that silence, you hear it, the faint echo of footsteps, ghostly and uneven. Civilians, soldiers, ghosts, it's hard to tell anymore. The city feels like it's breathing its last. Historians still argue whether Hitler truly believed Berlin could hold out or if he simply wanted the city to die with him. What's clear is that Berlin has become a mausoleum, not of marble and pride, but of soot and despair. A curious fact, beneath your feet, the U-Bahn tunnels have flooded. Some say it was deliberate, in order to drown invading Soviets. Others whisper it was an accident. Either way, the underground veins of the city now carry corpses instead of commuters. You pass a toppled statue, the stone eagle of the Reich, its wings snapped clean off. A stray cat curls beneath it, licking at an empty tin. You wonder if the cat even notices the war, or if this chaos is just another kind of weather. Above, a bomber drone buzzes faintly, not Allied this time, but the mechanical hum of Soviet reconnaissance planes circling for targets. The city map has become meaningless, street signs hang sideways or lie buried in rubble. You move by instinct, guided by firelight and the occasional flicker of movement, a child darting from one ruin to another, clutching something close, maybe bread, maybe a photograph. There's a strange poetry in destruction. The smell of burnt books mixes with the scent of spring rain sneaking through broken ceilings. You pause near a ruined library. A single page flutters loose and lands against your boot, a Goethe poem about eternity. You almost laugh. Somewhere, a piano plays, or rather, tries to. Just a few stumbling notes, echoing from an open window. Maybe someone's seeking comfort in music, or madness in memory. You take a deep breath, the air heavy with dust and diesel. This isn't the grand battlefield of heroes and flags. It's quieter, crueler, more human. Every building is a story collapsing mid-sentence. Every face you pass is pale and wide-eyed, still waiting for a miracle that will never come. As you step deeper into the ruined core of Berlin, you realize, this isn't just the end of a war. It's the death of an idea, of a myth that promised power, purity, destiny. And like all myths built on fear, it crumbles beautifully, terribly, beneath the weight of truth. You find the entrance to the Führerbunker almost by accident, half buried under mounds of shattered concrete near the Reich Chancellery Garden. The metal doors are dented, smeared with soot, but still guarded by soldiers with hollow eyes. They barely look at you as you pass. Their uniforms hang loose on starving frames, the once proud black and silver insignia now dulled to gray. You descend the narrow stairway, one hand brushing against the cold concrete wall, each step taking you deeper into the bowels of a dying empire. The air changes down here. It's thick, sour, a mix of cigarette smoke, damp cement, and cheap coffee. The electric bulbs flicker weakly, painting everyone in sickly yellow light. Somewhere, typewriters chatter like nervous insects. The bunker isn't the iron fortress of propaganda films. It's small, claustrophobic, oppressive. You can almost feel the madness sweating from its walls. You pass rooms with faded nameplates, secretaries, adjutants, generals. The sound of shuffling papers and low voices seeps through the cracks. Maps still hang on the walls, covered with red and blue pins that no longer mean anything. Most of the armies they represent no longer exist. Then you hear it, the uneven pacing of footsteps echoing from a side corridor. Adolf Hitler himself, though you only catch a glimpse, a frail man in a worn gray tunic, left hand trembling uncontrollably, eyes glazed with exhaustion. The myth of the Führer is gone, only a haunted man remains. His voice is still sharp, brittle as glass. He snaps at aides, demanding divisions that have already been destroyed. Historians still argue whether Hitler's final days were driven by denial, madness, or theatrical pride. Some say he believed his death would inspire future generations. Others think he simply couldn't face the humiliation of surrender. Whatever the truth, down here in the bunker, you can feel it, the eerie stillness of a man convinced the world must die with him. You step into the mess hall. A few officers sit hunched over tin plates, eating silently. The walls tremble every few minutes as artillery shells strike above. Dust drifts down from the ceiling like snow. Someone mutters that the Soviets are less than a kilometer away. Another man laughs, a dry, humorless sound, and lights a cigarette with shaking hands. A curious tidbit floats through the gloom. Eva Braun, still smiling, still pretending. She organizes a small party that evening. Champagne, gramophone music, laughter that doesn't reach the eyes. You watch her twirl in a simple dress, defiant against reality, her world shrinking by the hour. One of Hitler's secretaries plays with a small dog, Blondie, unaware that the animal's fate is sealed in a few short days. You sit at the edge of the room, the air pulsing with despair disguised as routine. Every corner smells of endings, burnt oil, wilted flowers, cheap perfume trying to mask rot. At some point, Goebbels enters, tall, ghost-like, muttering about loyalty and sacrifice. He carries his notebook everywhere, scribbling last speeches no one will hear. He talks about Germany's rebirth, but even he sounds unconvinced. You notice his wife Magda down the hall, brushing her children's hair. She looks calm, too calm. You don't know yet that she's already decided their fate. The ventilation hums softly, a lullaby for the damned. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the world above. Streets on fire, tanks grinding closer, rivers of smoke curling into the night sky. The walls shake again, closer now, louder. Dust rains down on your shoulders. Someone whispers that the Soviets have reached Potsdamer Platz. Another says the Americans are already on the Elbe. The circle is closing fast. The bunker becomes quieter, heavier. Every voice sounds rehearsed, every gesture mechanical. The war is ending, but no one dares to say it aloud. You stand again and look at the map one last time, red lines cutting deep into the heart of Berlin. It's not strategy anymore, it's a death certificate. Above, the city burns. Below, the Führer prepares to vanish into myth. You climb out of the bunker into the gray, choking daylight, and the sound hits you first, not battle, not shouting, but the strange chorus of children trying to act like soldiers. You follow it down Wilhelmstrasse, where a group of boys no older than 14 crouch behind a wrecked tram. Their helmets are too big, rifles longer than their arms. The Hitler Youth, the last, desperate line of defense for a cause already buried. They wave at you with forced bravado, the kind that only fear can forge. One boy grins, his front tooth missing, proudly showing off a Panzerfaust, a single-shot rocket launcher, his gift to the Führer. Another adjusts the strap on his uniform, which still smells of his mother's soap. They've been told the Soviets are monsters. They believe they're protecting their families, their homes. But when the ground shakes and a Soviet tank turns the corner, you see it, the terror flashing through their eyes. They scatter like birds. One fires blindly, the rocket whistling into a building and bringing it down in a shower of brick and dust. You run with them, lungs burning. The air tastes of gunpowder and plaster. This isn't a battlefield, it's a graveyard where childhood is buried. Historians still argue whether these boys volunteered or were forced at gunpoint. The truth, as always, is tangled. Some came willingly, desperate to matter. Others were dragged from their homes by men shouting about honor. Either way, Berlin's last army is made of trembling hands and cracking voices. You duck into an alley where an officer, barely older than 20, tries to rally them. He quotes propaganda slogans, talks of destiny, of fighting to the last bullet. His words echo hollow against the ruins. The boys listen because they have nothing else to believe in. When a mortar lands nearby, the officer is torn apart mid-sentence. The boys freeze. You can almost hear something break inside them, the last thread of illusion snapping. A curious detail, some of these soldiers wear armbands made from curtains or tablecloths, scavenged from home because uniforms ran out weeks ago. Their boots don't match. Their rations are sugar cubes and rainwater collected in helmets. One of them, a freckled kid with a cracked lens on his goggles, shows you a medal he found in the street. For bravery, he says proudly. It belonged to someone else, someone long dead. But for a moment he believes it's his. The distant thunder of artillery rolls closer. Soviet Katyusha rockets howl overhead, the Stalin's organs, screaming through the air like demons. You huddle behind a burned-out truck as debris rains down. A teddy bear lies in the gutter, missing an arm. It's absurd, tragic, perfect. As the noise fades, you step into what used to be a schoolyard. A blackboard still hangs on the far wall, half buried under dust. Chalk scrawls from a lesson long forgotten, arithmetic problems, neat handwriting. Now bullet holes puncture the equations like exclamation marks. A woman passes by, carrying a small bundle, a loaf of bread wrapped in a child's blanket. She doesn't look at you. Her eyes are wide but empty, like glass marbles. She could be anyone's mother. Maybe one of those boys. Maybe she's already lost him. The city moans around you, collapsing walls, crying children, distant prayers. Berlin isn't fighting anymore, it's just convulsing in its death throes. Yet the Nazi radio keeps broadcasting from somewhere underground, urging heroic resistance. The voice sounds almost cheerful. You can't decide if it's madness or cruelty. You stop by a burned-out bakery where a group of kids in rags huddle over a small fire made from old textbooks. One hums a tune, Lily Marlene, the soldier's song, soft and broken. It's strangely peaceful amid the ruin. You watch the sparks rise and fade into the gray sky, wondering if any of them will live to see spring again. As night falls, the sounds of the city become distant echoes, engines, boots, gunfire, laughter, sobbing. The world above the bunker is dying loudly, while below it, death waits in silence. You realize Berlin is no longer a city at war. It's a graveyard pretending to be alive, and even its children are the tombstones. You drift deeper into the city's skeleton, down streets that used to glitter with cafes and music halls. Now, they're quiet corridors of ash and memory. The air feels heavy, thick with the ghost of laughter. You pass a sign half melted by fire, still legible in places. Konditorei, best cakes in Berlin. Inside, the windows are blown out, the counters buried under glass. A single teacup sits upright among the rubble, perfectly clean, as if waiting for someone who will never come back. Down below, in the cellars, Berlin civilians are learning how to vanish. You duck into one of those basements, the smell of damp concrete and sweat hitting you instantly. Dozens of people are crammed into the dark, families, old men, women holding infants too quiet for their age. They huddle around candles, whispering rumors like prayers. One woman says the Americans are close. Another insists Hitler has a secret weapon. Nobody believes either, but no one dares to say so out loud. You sit beside an old man with a blanket draped around his shoulders. His spectacles are cracked, his voice calm. "I used to teach history," he murmurs. "Now we're part of it." He chuckles softly, like he's telling a joke only he understands. You notice he's holding a chess piece, a black king, in his palm. Maybe he brought it for luck, or maybe to remind himself that every game ends the same way. A young girl passes around a pot of soup. It smells faintly of cabbage and despair. She smiles shyly when you thank her, her hair tied back with a ribbon that looks too bright for this place. Historians still argue about how Berlin civilians survived those final weeks, whether it was courage, faith, or pure numbness. But sitting here, surrounded by flickering light and trembling hands, it feels like survival is less a choice and more a habit. Above ground, you can hear the artillery getting closer. The ceiling dust drifts down with every boom. Someone crosses themselves. Someone else mutters about karma. You can almost feel the collective heartbeat, tense, uneven, waiting. A curious story spreads among the group, about a bakery in Kreuzberg that still opens at dawn, serving bread for free to anyone brave enough to come. The baker says, the storyteller whispers, if the world ends, it should at least smell of bread. No one laughs. But for a moment, you can almost imagine it. Warm crust, golden light, a tiny defiance against oblivion. You climb back to the surface after an hour that feels like a lifetime. The city greets you with a strange twilight, orange from the flames reflecting off the low clouds. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings, not from faith, but from the heat melting its mechanism. You walk past a makeshift hospital inside a subway station. Nurses in soot-stained uniforms tend to soldiers and civilians alike. There's barely any medicine left. Morphine has become myth. A doctor, his face gray with exhaustion, ties a tourniquet with one hand while holding a cigarette in the other. You catch a glimpse of a chalkboard listing the names of the dead. The list ends mid-sentence, the chalk stub broken. There's a debate near the entrance. Two soldiers, one old enough to be the other's father. The older man says they must keep fighting. The younger shakes his head, muttering, fighting for what? The Führer's ghosts. The argument dies when another shell lands nearby, cutting the conversation short forever. You move toward the Spree River, where once stood restaurants and dance halls. Now, their reflections in the dark water look like scars. You spot a group of women washing blood from sheets, their movements slow, mechanical. They hum softly, as if rhythm alone can keep them sane. One pauses, looks up at you and says, "We used to have picnics here." Her voice is flat, her eyes distant. Then she returns to scrubbing. You pause on a bridge, watching the embers drift across the sky like dying fireflies. The wind carries faint laughter, not joyful, not living, just the echo of what used to be. Somewhere beneath your feet, the old man with the chess piece makes his next move, even though there's no one left to play against. And you realize, this isn't a city under siege anymore. It's a waiting room between life and memory, where people breathe not because they hope, but because they've forgotten how to stop. You wake to the smell of smoke and the rumble of engines, deep, metallic, unstoppable. The Red Army has arrived at the edge of the Tiergarten. The ground trembles with every shell. You move through the wreckage as dawn bleeds through the haze, painting everything in dull amber. The Soviets are closing in from all directions, and Berlin feels like a giant caught in its final heartbeat. Soviet tanks grind over cobblestones once meant for victory parades. The sound is bone-deep, like thunder-given wheels. From somewhere nearby, a loudspeaker still blares Goebbels' voice. The Führer commands you to fight to the last man. The irony is painful. There aren't enough last men left to follow such orders. You take shelter near a collapsed tram, peering out at the approaching tide. Soviet infantry move like shadows through the smoke, faces smeared with soot, eyes sharp but tired. They're not invincible. They're human and filthy and hungry, but they carry the momentum of history behind them. You watch one stop to light a cigarette from the burning debris of a bookstore. For a moment, he just stands there, staring at the flames. A soldier, yes, but also a man wondering what comes after. Historians still argue whether the Soviet assault on Berlin was strategic or symbolic, whether Stalin truly needed the city, or simply wanted to plant his flag on Hitler's grave. What's certain is that by April 28th, Berlin had become both target and trophy. Every street was a battlefield, every building a fortress. The Germans fought with desperation, the Soviets with inevitability. You step around the ruins of the zoo flag tower. The massive concrete structure looms like a gray mountain, its anti-aircraft guns still pointed skyward, useless now. Inside, thousands of civilians hide, mothers clutching babies, soldiers licking wounds, children tracing cracks on the walls. The Soviets call out through loudspeakers, "Surrender! Save yourselves!" But fear and pride make strange allies and no one moves. A curious detail, some Berliners painted white sheets with the word Kinder, children, and hung them in windows, hoping the advancing soldiers would show mercy. Others scrawled prayers on their doors or pasted old portraits of Lenin, pretending sympathy for the victors. Desperation can be creative. You cross an intersection where a German officer stands in the open, waving a pistol at invisible troops. His uniform is immaculate, boots polished, face streaked with tears. He screams, "Hold the line," into empty air, then collapses to his knees, sobbing. His voice echoes against the broken walls like a confession. The artillery grows louder. The Soviets are less than a kilometer from the Reich Chancellery now. You see columns of smoke curling from the subway tunnels, an entire world burning below the surface. Every explosion feels like a heartbeat gone wrong. You pass a propaganda poster still clinging to a brick wall, a smiling soldier under the words, "Berlin will stand forever." A shell hits nearby, tearing the poster in half. The smiling face folds into the rubble. You almost smile back, dark humor in the apocalypse. You find yourself at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. To your left, the Reichstag, its grand dome shattered. To your right, the Spree, now thick with debris. A dead horse lies in the street, its eyes glazed, its body draped in a tattered Nazi flag. Someone's written a single word across it in chalk, "Ende." The Red Army's loudspeakers blare again, this time in German, "Berliners. Your leaders have abandoned you. Surrender now and live." But deep underground, Hitler refuses to hear. He still rants about phantom armies that will come to his rescue, the 12th Army, the Steiner Division. They don't exist. They never will. You duck into the ruins of a cinema. The projector lies in pieces, film reel strewn like entrails. You pick one up, triumph of the will. Of course. The irony is almost poetic, propaganda burned by the fire it helped create. As evening falls, the city glows red, not from sunset, but from firestorms consuming what's left. The Soviets are closing in street by street, basement by basement. You can hear them shouting orders in Russian, the clatter of rifles, the crunch of boots. Berlin trembles like a creature cornered. And in that trembling you realize, the red tide isn't just the enemy. It's history itself, unrelenting, cold, and inevitable. No ideology, no bunker, no belief can stop it now. You return underground as the city above disintegrates. The bunker's air feels thicker now, as if even the oxygen knows what's about to happen. It's April 30th, 1945. The end has a date, an hour, and a heartbeat. Down here, time slows to a crawl, and every tick of the clock sounds like a drumbeat for a funeral. You pass through the narrow corridors again, the same stale smoke curling under the flickering lights. The laughter from Eva Braun's little parties has stopped. The gramophone sits silent, a needle frozen in place. The walls are damp with condensation and sweat, the floor littered with cigarette butts and coffee cups. People whisper in corners, voices trembling like the light. Hitler sits in his small office at the far end of the hall. The once tidy desk is buried under papers, most of them meaningless now. Maps of armies that don't exist. Reports of victories that never happened. His hair is unkempt, his movements jerky, his eyes dull but burning with that same strange conviction. He's reading, dictating, rewriting. Every few minutes, he mutters about betrayal, Himmler, Göring, the generals, everyone. Historians still argue whether his last hours were lucid or delusional. Some say he was calm, eerily methodical. Others claim he was detached from reality entirely. You can't tell. You only see a man who's realized that his empire has shrunk to the size of this bunker, and even that is collapsing around him. Eva Braun enters quietly, dressed neatly, almost elegantly. She's smiling again, that same defiant smile you saw before. She hands him tea, then sits nearby. No tears, no fear. Just waiting. The two of them talk in low voices. No one hears the words clearly, but the tone is unmistakable, finality wrapped in calm. A curious detail, the bunker staff later say Hitler thanked them all, one by one, shaking hands, speaking softly. It's a strange kind of politeness for a man who once demanded millions die for him. When he reaches his dog, Blondie, he pauses. The animal wags its tail, trusting as ever. Moments later, a test of poison ends that trust forever. The silence that follows is unbearable. You stand by the corridor as the doors close. Eva laughs one last time. A light, almost musical sound that echoes briefly before being swallowed by the concrete. Then comes a gunshot. Just one. Short, sharp, final. Nobody moves at first. It's as if the air itself refuses to believe it. Then Goebbels whispers something, you can't hear what. A guard nods, walks to the door, opens it halfway. The smell of gunpowder slips out, faint but unmistakable. They wrap the bodies quickly as ordered. The faces are covered, the details erased. Outside, in the Chancellery Garden, the flames rise again, this time not from war, but from cremation. The bodies are doused with petrol, set alight beneath a gray, indifferent sky. The crackle of fire mingles with the distant thunder of Soviet artillery. You watch from the doorway as smoke curls upward, joining the millions of ashes already floating over Berlin. The Führer's final speech has been given, his last parade burned into oblivion. And still, the shells keep falling. The war doesn't even pause to notice the death of its architect. Inside the bunker, silence becomes unbearable. Some cry openly, others just stare at the walls. Goebbels writes furiously in his notebook, muttering about loyalty and destiny. You glance at his wife, Magda, her face serene, eyes shining strangely. You can't yet see what she's planning, but the calm in her expression tells you it won't be survival. You walk back toward the corridor, feeling the air cool as the hours drag on. The world outside continues to collapse, but here in the bunker, something almost peaceful settles. The dictator is gone, and what remains is the echo of belief, hollow, fragile, and fading fast. Historians still debate whether the flames in the garden truly consumed everything, or if fragments remained, bone, cloth, myth. But as you step into the stillness, one truth becomes clear, even the loudest tyrants end in whispers. Above ground, the Soviet shells continue their rhythm, marking time in explosions. And below, in this suffocating tomb of ambition, the last chapter of the Reich has been written, not in ink or blood this time, but in smoke. The news spreads through the bunker like a chill wind. The Führer is dead. The words are whispered, never shouted. Some people gasp. Some simply nod as if they've known it for days. There's no celebration, no chaos, just an exhausted sort of emptiness. Outside, the battle rages on, indifferent to the death beneath the ground. You climb once again into the open air, squinting against the ashen daylight. The city is quieter now, but only because there's less left to destroy. Everywhere you look, white flags bloom from windows, sheets, shirts, handkerchiefs, anything that can signal surrender. For the first time in years, Berlin's rooftops are not decorated with swastikas, but with pleas for mercy. A column of German soldiers shuffles down the street ahead of you. They move like ghosts, helmets dented, rifles slung loosely, steps unsteady. An officer barks half-hearted orders, but no one's really listening anymore. You watch a young man throw his weapon into the rubble and walk away without a word. Another follows. Soon, the entire column dissolves like smoke. Historians still argue how organized Berlin's surrender really was. Some claim the Wehrmacht tried to negotiate a formal ceasefire. Others say the city simply crumbled into chaos. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. What you can see, though, is this. Soldiers who once marched to Wagner now limp to silence. You pass through a courtyard where two men are tearing off their insignia, ripping the eagle and swastika from their uniforms. Better prisoners than martyrs, one mutters. The other nods, tossing his medals into the mud. They glint briefly, then disappear beneath the dirt. A curious image sticks with you. A piano pushed into the street, its lid open like a wounded jaw. A Soviet soldier, young and muddy, pauses to press a few keys. The sound is absurdly pure, echoing over the ruins. A German woman emerges from a doorway, her hands raised, and the soldier just nods, continuing the tune. For a fleeting moment, music replaces war. You follow the growing trickle of civilians emerging from basements. They move cautiously, blinking against the daylight, clutching bundles of whatever survived, blankets, photo albums, bread crusts. You overhear snippets of disbelief. "It's really over?" one whispers. Another answers, "It has to be." At a nearby crossroads, a group of SS officers stands apart, refusing to surrender. They argue among themselves, honor, loyalty, death before capture. One pulls out his pistol, trembling, his hand shaking so violently that the gun clatters to the ground. He picks it up, presses it to his temple, and then lowers it again. No speeches. No glory. Just hesitation. A Soviet tank rolls by, its engine coughing black smoke. The crew shouts warnings for civilians to stay down. One man tries to wave a white cloth, but panic ripples through the crowd when someone mistakes a gunshot nearby. The scene dissolves into shouting and confusion. You realize surrender isn't clean. It's messy, terrified, full of misunderstanding. You walk toward the river, where German soldiers are stacking weapons in piles under Soviet supervision. Pistols, rifles, knives, all clattering into a metallic mountain. The sound is strangely rhythmic, almost musical, the end of a war measured in the sound of surrendering steel. A Soviet officer walks past you, muttering something about Berlin being ashes. His expression is unreadable, half victory, half disgust. One of the German soldiers turns to you, eyes hollow. "We fought for nothing," he says flatly. "All this death, for nothing." You want to answer, but there's nothing left to say. History rarely gives clean answers, only echoes. Evening settles slowly, a red haze over the ruins. Fires burn low, the thunder of artillery fades into scattered bursts. The war isn't quite finished, but Berlin has stopped fighting. It's as if the city itself has exhaled, one long, weary breath. In the distance, church bells ring for the first time in months. Not for worship, not for victory, but perhaps just because someone remembered what peace might sound like. You stand still, listening. The sound is fragile, almost tentative, as if afraid it might be mistaken for gunfire. You look around, at the white flags, the quiet faces, the drifting smoke, and realize, surrender doesn't look like peace. It looks like exhaustion dressed as survival. The morning after surrender smells different. The thick, acrid stench of gunpowder has begun to fade, replaced by something damp and almost domestic, smoke, dust, bread baking somewhere against all odds. You wake to the muffled sounds of Soviet boots echoing through the street outside. They aren't fighting anymore, just moving with purpose, sweeping through what's left of the city. You step outside into a world that feels paused. Berlin isn't celebrating its liberation, it's stunned by it. Rubble stretches as far as you can see, but among the broken bricks, people have started sweeping, as if tidying might make the past few years vanish. A child drags a broken toy tank across the pavement, humming quietly. The tune sounds like a lullaby, but it's hard to tell, so many melodies were lost under the roar of war. A group of Soviet soldiers passes you. They look barely older than the child. Some hand out bread to civilians, others post signs written in Russian and German. No weapons. Curfew at 9 p.m. Obey the Red Army. For the first time, the streets have order, but not the kind Berliners recognize. You pass by a wall where someone has scrawled in chalk, "Wo ist mein Sohn?" Where is my son? It's joined by dozens of similar messages, desperate handwriting crawling across the stone. The entire city has become a bulletin board of grief. Historians still argue whether the Soviet occupation of Berlin was an act of justice or vengeance. The answer, like most truths of war, depends on who you ask. To many Berliners, the soldiers who once symbolized salvation now walk the line between conquerors and liberators. You can see it in their eyes, a mix of pride and exhaustion, cruelty and mercy in the same breath. You duck into a building that still stands, A former cafe, its windows shattered but its chairs intact. Inside, a few Berliners sit quietly, sipping from chipped mugs filled with something that might be coffee or just boiled grain water. The owner nods at you, his hands shaking slightly as he pours. "It's free," he says. "For today at least." His voice carries the weariness of a man who's forgotten how to hope. A Soviet officer enters the cafe. The air tenses for a moment, but he only removes his hat, asks softly, "Any milk?" The owner shakes his head. The officer nods and leaves a small ration tin on the counter anyway, milk powder. For a moment, both men seem surprised by their own humanity. As you continue down the street, you notice a strange thing. Berlin is quiet, but it's not silent. The soundscape has changed. Instead of artillery, you hear sweeping brooms, whispered conversations, the distant creak of wagons hauling debris. It's the sound of a city rediscovering itself, one cautious breath at a time. Near the Brandenburg Gate, Soviet photographers set up tripods. They capture images of soldiers raising flags, smiling beside tanks, standing atop ruined monuments. These photos will one day appear in textbooks as symbols of victory, but you know that behind each smile, there's a shadow. A soldier might have lost his entire village to the same enemy he's now feeding. A woman in the background might have lost her family to both sides. A quirky fact for your sleepy brain: some Berliners began referring to this period as the month of the white flags. It wasn't official, of course, just a nickname whispered among survivors, a shorthand for surrender and survival intertwined. The image fits, an entire city fluttering like linen in the wind, caught between shame and relief. You cross what used to be Wilhelmstrasse, now a cratered mess. A lone streetcar lies half submerged in rubble, its tracks twisted like metal snakes. Someone has scrawled on it in charcoal, "Nie wieder Krieg, never again war." The words are uneven, shaky, but they feel truer than anything you've seen in days. Evening settles again, golden light filtering through the haze. You hear a woman singing faintly from a nearby building. The melody is old, perhaps Schubert, perhaps something older still. It floats above the ruins, a fragile defiance against despair. For the first time in this long, haunted journey, you feel something like stillness. Not joy, not peace. Just the strange quiet that follows a nightmare when you're not yet sure you're awake. Days blend into weeks, and Berlin begins to breathe again, though every breath tastes of ashes. The Red Army now controls the city, and Soviet banners hang from buildings where the Reich once flew its eagles. You walk through streets where the language has changed, signs in Cyrillic appear beside the old German ones. The people move cautiously, like actors unsure of their new roles in this grim aftermath. The survivors emerge from their cellars, pale and blinking, rediscovering sunlight as if for the first time in years. Bread lines form outside abandoned bakeries. A rumor spreads that the Soviets are distributing food near Alexanderplatz. You join the queue, standing among hundreds of others. The air smells faintly of boiled cabbage and wet dust. A soldier hands you a small tin of meat and a hunk of coarse black bread. No one speaks much. Hunger has a way of silencing people. A historian once described this time as Berlin's ghost period, a few weeks when the city existed but didn't quite live. Streets were filled with people, yet they moved through them like shadows, avoiding each other's eyes. You can feel that weight even now, the heaviness of survival. A woman beside you clutches a baby swaddled in rags. She hums under her breath, something soft and sad. "He was born during the shelling," she whispers when you glance her way. "Didn't even cry. Just looked at me." You nod, unsure what comfort to offer. The child stares at the world as if it already knows too much. You wander toward the Reich Chancellery, what's left of it. Once, it was the nerve center of power. Now, it's a jagged skeleton of blackened stone. Soviet engineers swarm over the site, digging, cataloging, photographing. You overhear them discussing the remains. The Führer's supposed corpse has already been found and burned, or maybe not. Historians still argue whether those ashes ever truly belonged to him. Conspiracy, myth, denial, all swirl together like the smoke that once rose from this ruin. A quirky tidbit: for weeks, Berlin children played among the craters near the Chancellery, collecting shell casings as toys. Some traded them like marbles, each caliber worth a different point. It's a strange, innocent corruption, play born from destruction. You step around the shattered marble pillars, your boots crunching over fragments of grand architecture. Someone has scrawled graffiti on a surviving wall in red paint. Here in det der Wahnsinn. Here ends the madness. The letters drip, uneven and raw, like blood still refusing to dry. Around you, reconstruction begins in small, desperate ways. Women known as Trümmerfrauen, rubble women, form human chains, passing bricks from one to another, clearing the streets by hand. You watch them work with quiet determination, sleeves rolled, faces smeared with soot. No one directs them, they simply begin. It's as if they've decided that waiting for orders is what got them here in the first place. One of them glances your way and smiles faintly. "Can't rebuild a city if no one starts," she says. Her voice is hoarse but steady. You realize that amidst the ruins, these women are the first sign of rebirth. As night falls, the Soviet patrols light bonfires in the intersections. Soldiers sit around them, smoking, talking softly, trading stories about their villages, their families, their dead. You catch a few words, names, laughter, sorrow, but mostly silence. War has stolen their voices too. You find yourself near the Spree River. The bridges are twisted, half-collapsed, their reflections shivering in the black water. The Soviet soldier stands there, staring into the current. He speaks without looking at you. "I lost my brother in Stalingrad," he says in halting German. "Now I'm here, and I don't know what winning means anymore." The words linger. You realize that even the victors are haunted. The war may have ended, but the silence it leaves behind is heavier than the gunfire ever was. As you walk back through the dim streets, a faint sound reaches you, someone tuning a radio. Static, then a voice in Russian, then another in English. News from London, Moscow, Washington. The world outside Berlin is moving on. But here, time feels slower, suspended in grief and ash. Tomorrow, they say, the city will officially surrender to the Western Allies as well. But for tonight, Berlin just sleeps, uneasily, dreamlessly, under the glow of fires that no longer burn for war, but simply to keep the darkness away. You walk toward the Reichstag, now a shattered monument to the folly of ambition. Its dome is gone, roof collapsed, windows blown out, yet somehow it still stands, a skeletal reminder that even broken things can endure. You join the small crowd of civilians and soldiers gathered near the steps, all staring upward as the Soviets raise their flag for the first time. The cloth flutters in the wind, red against gray ruins, a symbol that will echo for decades. A photographer climbs atop the rubble, balancing carefully as he captures the moment. You notice the soldier who planted the banner, a young man, eyes wide, lips pressed into a tight line. He's proud, yes, but there's a weariness in his stance, a human uncertainty beneath the triumph. For every photograph taken, there is a story of loss and desperation erased, an entire city forced to witness victory that feels incomplete. Historians still argue whether this flag over the Reichstag was an act of strategic conquest or propaganda for history. Some say the iconic photo was staged, repeated multiple times to get the perfect angle. Others insist it captures the raw, chaotic truth of that April morning. Either way, the image becomes timeless, a symbol not only of victory but also of the cost that came with it. You step closer to the steps, noticing a curious detail. A lone bicycle leaned against a broken column. Its tires are flat, seat torn, and basket bent. Yet someone has left a small flower in it, perhaps a child, perhaps a soldier. It's fragile, human, and absurdly hopeful amid the devastation. Around you, soldiers share cigarettes with civilians. Some exchange chocolate bars, others just nod quietly. The language is rough, gesturing more than words, but a sense of shared relief lingers. The city is no longer a battlefield but a strange kind of theater, where actors play roles they never auditioned for. You move inside the building, careful not to step on broken glass. Soviet engineers are cataloging what remains, dragging metal and rubble, taking notes. They speak in Russian, pointing at graffiti, rubble, and walls, yet you understand the universal language of human labor, restoring, documenting, witnessing. Nearby, a group of children plays among the ruins, tossing stones into puddles, laughing softly despite the smoke still in their hair. One of them finds a small helmet, too big for his head, and wears it like a crown. You pause, watching, realizing that innocence can persist, even in a city that has been gutted by war. Across the street, a former German officer trudges slowly, hands in pockets, head bowed. His medals, once gleaming, are gone. He glances at the Soviet flag and sighs, perhaps for the Reich, perhaps for himself. You wonder how he will remember today, as defeat, relief, or simply survival. The sun lowers, casting long shadows across the Reichstag steps. Smoke curls from distant fires, curling around columns and arches. You can almost imagine the echoes of speeches that once rang here, voices of fanatics drowned in fire and artillery. The world has changed, yet these stones, these fragments, remain as witnesses. In the quiet, a single bird lands on a broken railing. Its wings twitch once, twice, and then it takes off into the red-tinged sky. A fragile symbol of life returning, even in the aftermath of so much death. As night falls, the city glimmers faintly in the glow of distant fires and lanterns. Berlin is conquered, defeated, and yet undeniably alive. The flag over the Reichstag isn't just a victory banner, it's a marker of transition, of a city suspended between collapse and rebirth. You step back, feeling the weight of it all, knowing the world has changed here forever, one fluttering banner at a time. The city breathes differently now, war's roar replaced by cautious steps, whispered conversations, and the occasional clang of distant construction. You walk through streets that were once grand boulevards, now scarred trenches of concrete and rubble. Every building tells a story, a charred roof here, a leaning wall there, a single intact window glowing with candlelight like a small, stubborn heart. The survivors are emerging in droves, blinking at sunlight that feels too bright after months underground. Families gather in small clusters, sharing what little food remains. Children scavenge for toys in the ruins, laughter fragile and hesitant. A man carries a crate of books, dusted off and guarded as if they were gold. These are not just remnants, they are lifelines to a past that refuses to be entirely erased. You pass the ruins of a theater, the stage collapsed, curtains burned to cinders, but someone has drawn chalk lines on the floor, marking where the actors once stood. Nearby, a woman sweeps the debris slowly, almost ceremoniously, as if restoring dignity to a world that has been stripped bare. Historians still argue about the psychological toll on Berliners who survived those final days, whether sheer willpower, numbness, or ritualistic acts of order helped them endure. Here, you see the evidence firsthand. A curious sight catches your eye, a small garden, planted in the middle of a crater. Wildflowers, stubborn and colorful, push through the ash. Someone has added a hand-painted sign, Leben kehrt zurück, life returns. It's almost absurdly poetic, a delicate defiance against the destruction surrounding it. You move toward the banks of the Spree, where the water is calm now, reflecting a pale sky streaked with smoke. A few men and boys fish with makeshift rods, coaxing sustenance from the river. Nearby, women wash clothes in buckets, their movements rhythmic, meditative. The city is learning to live again, slowly, awkwardly, but with a tentative grace. Soviet patrols continue their rounds, but the tension has shifted. They are no longer hunters but custodians of a conquered city. Occasionally, they offer bread, sugar, or small gestures of humanity. The lines between victor and victim blur in quiet, understated ways. You realize that survival is no longer about hiding. It's about navigating these delicate human interactions, small steps toward normalcy. A group of children plays among twisted metal and shattered glass, their laughter echoing through the empty streets. One picks up a fragment of a propaganda poster and uses it as a kite. Another waves a white cloth at a passing soldier. It is innocence reclaimed, fragile yet unstoppable. As the sun sets, you find yourself on a high vantage point overlooking the city. Smoke curls from distant fires, street lamps flicker to life, and the ruins of monuments cast long shadows. Berlin is scarred, yes, but not broken. Its people, though weary, are resilient. They move through ash and rubble with purpose, intent on rebuilding both their city and themselves. The wind carries faint sounds from the past, whispers of orders, echoes of marching feet, the soft murmur of prayers. Yet above all, there is a quiet promise: life continues. You take a deep breath, feeling the weight of history settle softly around you. The city sleeps, but it dreams of recovery. You sit on a crumbling wall, letting the evening air wash over you. The city around you moves slowly, like a giant sigh. Smoke curls lazily from distant fires, drifting into the violet sky, blending with the first stars of night. The streets are quiet now, not empty, but hushed, children tucked into corners, mothers gathering scraps, men tracing the path of their own survival. Every movement seems deliberate, gentle, as if Berlin itself has learned to tiptoe. The lights in the shattered windows flicker softly, each one a tiny promise that someone remains, watching, breathing, enduring. You imagine the stories behind each dim glow, laughter suppressed, whispered memories shared, tears wiped away in solitude. It's not a city of triumph tonight, nor a city of defeat. It is a city of quiet persistence, holding itself together in the fragile space between destruction and rebirth. The air smells faintly of rain and ash, a combination that somehow feels cleansing. You take a deep breath, imagining it seeping into every ruined building, every scarred street, every exhausted body. You can almost hear the heart of Berlin beating under the rubble, a slow, steady rhythm that refuses to stop. A soft breeze carries faint echoes of the past, distant gunfire, hurried footsteps, whispered orders, laughter that once filled the air before the chaos swallowed it. You acknowledge them, but they no longer bite. They are memories now, suspended in time, reminders that history is alive in ways both cruel and tender. You let your gaze wander to the horizon. Smoke and haze mingle with the fading light, painting the city in watercolor grays and muted golds. Somewhere a bird chirps, hesitant and tentative, reclaiming the sky that was once filled with sirens. The sound is small, fragile, yet it feels like a signal. Life goes on even when everything else has fallen. The night stretches, gentle and slow. You feel the weight of the stories, the lives, the losses, and the courage. And as you breathe in the calm, you understand that Berlin is not just a city, it is a testament to endurance. To the human spirit that persists through darkness, rubble, and despair. You close your eyes, letting the soft hum of distant fires, whispering wind, and city heartbeat lull you into quiet reflection. The past is present, the present is fragile, and the future is waiting, patient and slow.